Today we'll take a closer look at what happens under the hood when you send an email. This video will cover the original implementation of the SMTP protocol based off available research papers and documentation. We'll break down its responsibilities, take a look at the communication between the client and receiver SMTP servers, and finally we'll use Terminal to send an email by issuing SMTP commands directly to a SMTP server. If you've ever configured an email client before, you may have seen terms like IMAP, POP, and SMTP. While IMAP and POP are protocols used for retrieving emails from a mailbox, SMTP is strictly a sending protocol. We'll take a closer look at IMAP and POP some other time. SMTP is a part of the application layer of the TCP/IP protocol and traditionally operates on port 25, and it's responsible for orchestrating sending your email across different networks. Now, some terminology that may be useful to understand before we take a deeper dive. Firstly, a user agent. This is the application you use to send and receive electronic mail. This could be Outlook, Mozilla, Gmail, anything. A mail transfer agent, also known as a message transfer agent, is a process running on an SMTP server that helps forward emails to the correct recipient and helps manage delivery of emails to a user's mailbox. Often, MTAs help maintain a mail queue so repeat delivery attempts can be scheduled in the case a remote server is unavailable. The MTA often contains a specialized piece of software called the Mail Delivery Agent or Message Delivery Agent, which is responsible for the delivery of the email message to a local recipient's mailbox, whereas the MTA focuses more on forwarding the email from SMTP server to SMTP server. Simply put, SMTP defines a communication protocol that dictates how an email moves from your computer's mail transfer agent, potentially across several networks, to the mail transfer agent on the destination server. When a user sends an email through the Apple Mail app, for example, a client SMTP process opens a TCP connection to a SMTP process running on a server somewhere else. After an initial handshake, the client and server processes engage in a short request-response dialogue in order to send an email. We'll take a closer look at that flow shortly. Take this basic use case of the SMTP protocol. The situation is likely one in which the email is being sent within the same organization. You have the user at a machine using a user agent like the Apple Mail app, which gets sent to their MTA for sending. The MTA communicates with other MTAs over TCP/IP and delivers a message to the recipient. Notice how the MTA facilitates both in sending the email and managing the recipient's mailbox. In reality, though, an email message would pass through multiple intermediary MTAs, also known as mail gateways, on the way to delivering the message to the correct recipient. An added benefit of email gateways is that they can handle electronic mail prepared by some other protocol and transform it to the SMTP format before forwarding it along, or vice versa. In this diagram, which depicts a more typical SMTP flow, the local MTA is merely an intermediate step along the email's journey. We still have a user using some application to send the email, which then goes to their local MTA and then takes a few hops between intermediate MTAs, likely outside of their network, until it gets to the MTA that manages the recipient's mailbox. An email comprises of two parts, an envelope and a message header and body, much like a traditional piece of mail. The envelope contains the sender and recipient fields, as well as some additional metadata like timestamp and MIME properties. Within the email, we have the message header and a message body. Let's look at what modern headers look like. Here are the headers from a promotional email from Caviar. As you can see, the header fields can contain far more than the sender and recipient information. These fields are merely the minimum requirement. Any text following the headers is classified as a body. The body is a user-generated content of the email. The body section is usually terminated with a null, line, blank line, or one of a few potential terminating characters, like a period. The envelope is generally transmitted separately from the body of the email. The SMTP servers first will try and validate the sender-recipient information in the header before they even bother with transmitting the body of the email. The fields are sent to the SMTP server using the mail from recipient to commands, which we'll look at in a moment. On the receiving SMTP server, it will periodically check the contents of its mailbox for new emails and forward or deliver them as necessary. As previously mentioned, SMTP is part of the application layer of the TCP/IP protocol. As a result, it should come as no surprise that SMTP uses DNS to determine the IP address of the SMTP server to contact. Once the IP address of the recipient is acquired, the client SMTP server can connect to the remote SMTP server through a short sequence of authentication commands. For example, the hello command, which is used to help identify the client SMTP process to the server SMTP process, and is usually followed by the fully qualified hostname. This is typically only sent once per session, and once this authentication step is complete, a client SMTP process can send out as many emails as they wish. The mail from command, which specifies the sender email address, the recipient to command, which specifies who the email is intended for. This is how you can get services like BCC and CC on an email. You can just follow up with multiple recipient to commands. The data. Now this is the command that precedes the body of the email. It's a command that notifies the receiving server that it should prepare to receive some ASCII content that ends with a null line or a period. We'll take a look at these commands in practice using terminal shortly, but it's important to know that these commands are sent as ASCII text, which allows for building mail clients and servers on any platform. Though the list of SMTP commands is larger than this list, hello, mail from, recipient to, data, and quit are a few of the core commands. Alright, now let's jump into our demo. I've got two terminal windows open. One is going to function as a client and the other one will be the receiver. And before we continue any further, I'm assuming that you have Homebrew installed. So I'm going to go ahead and run brew install Telnet, which is the only other dependency we'll need for this demo. All of the commands will be available in the description down below. Now that we're done installing Telnet, let's go ahead and run this command. What this is going to do is this is going to start a local server on our machine running on port 2525 that will be serving as an SMTP server. So now in a separate terminal window, I'll go ahead and run this command, telnet localhost 2525. So effectively, I'm trying to use a terminal window on the right to connect through TCP IP to the SMTP server on the left. So now we're ready to manually issue some SMTP commands. So the first thing we'll do is we need to authenticate ourselves. So we can say hello, and we can go ahead and say our host name. In this case, I'll just use my website. All right. We've received a 250 confirmation from the server, so we're ready to move on to the next step, providing the envelope header information, which would be the sender and the receiver. So let's go ahead and say mail from, and I'll say this email, for example. Okay, and it has acknowledged that it's received that part, and we'll say the recipient is going to be apple.com, for example. Cool. So now we have another set of 250 response. So now we're going to go ahead and start providing the data payload. So we can type in data next, and you can see that it prompts us to end our data segment with the period. So we'll go ahead and just put in something arbitrary, hello world. And once we're done with the message, we'll do period on a new line, and we'll hit enter. Now if we come over here to the left-hand side, our server SMTP process, we can see that it has received the email and that it's been sent. Now, we are done here. We don't need to send any more emails. We can if we want to. We've completed the authentication step. So we can send as many emails as we like without having to re-authenticate, but let's go ahead and call it quits for now. So we'll go ahead and type in quit. We'll receive an acknowledgement that the TCP connection has been closed, and there we go. This is effectively what happens every single time you send an email. This is all happening behind the scenes, sort of under the hood, but it really just distilled down to these few commands that you saw here. So I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the SMTP protocol and how email works. If you enjoy content like this and you have other topics that you'd like me to cover in this kind of manner, please just make a request in the comment section down below. And yeah, if you like the video, please subscribe and like it. Thanks.